Hi, welcome to SwissWatchExpo. With the summertime quickly approaching us, I want to go over our two most iconic dive watches, so stay tuned. Hi, welcome to SwissWatchExpo. Jason here. And with the summertime coming up very quickly now, you might be looking for a really nice dive watch or kind of a do-it-all timepiece for the summertime. And today we have some very iconic timepieces in front of me that you've probably noticed while looking through our website. So we have today a side-by-side comparison of the Omega Seamaster Diver 300 as well as the iconic Rolex Submariner. And of course, these two are probably the most popular dive watches out in the market right now. And I know most of you guys looking at a dive watch probably don't do any sort of professional diving, but you do want a nice watch that you maybe want to wear while you're swimming in the pool or in the ocean, something that's going to be safe for those occasions. So these are going to be really nice options, and you really can't go wrong with either one. But today I do want to go over kind of some of the pros and cons that I like about each one of these. So first off, we're going to go over the beautiful Rolex Submariner here, and this is just a fantastic timepiece, something that's been in the Rolex line for a very long time. And usually when you ask about a Rolex timepiece, this is one that does pop in a lot of people's minds when they're thinking about a Rolex dive watch. So you have this beautiful black bezel, and this is the updated 41 millimeter. So they do come in at 40 millimeter for the older generations, but for the current generation, this one specifically, the 126610, does come in now the 41 millimeter case. Now, it doesn't look like a very large timepiece just because of the way they taper in the lugs, which I think is a really good idea that Rolex put on this timepiece. So it won't wear quite as large as a normal like 41 millimeter timepiece. And honestly, when I put the 41 millimeter next to the 40 millimeter versions, I really can't see too much of a difference. So don't worry too much about the size if you are just looking for the Rolex Submariner line. Now, one thing I do enjoy about this one is that you do have the ceramic bezel and you do have ceramic on the Omega timepiece as well. But if you take a really close look, it is actually indented. It's almost like engraved inside of the bezel, which I think adds a nice texture to it. And I think it just kind of elevates the look of the overall timepiece. I know it is a very small detail that you may not notice when you're just kind of wearing it on, but it is really nice to take a close look and see kind of how it has that little bit of texture inside of that bezel. Of course, you have your looms on the hour markers and your hour hands, minute hands, and of course the loom pip at the top right here. And if you take a look, let's compare the bezel sound. So you have a nice tactile feel on the bezel here when you are rotating it. And it is unidirectional, of course, because it's a dive watch. So really nice sound. I really actually enjoy the bezel on this one. And let's hear the Omega Seamaster. So not quite as much tension, but it does have a really nice tactile feel. I almost feel like you can feel every little bit when you are rotating this bezel. But as far as just like overall feel, I think I would put the Rolex Submariner over the Omega Seamaster just in terms of the way that the bezel turns. Another thing I really do enjoy about these dive watches, and both of these feature this on the clasp, is that you can actually adjust the clasp here with this diver's extension right here. So you can use this little glide lock system in order to actually adjust the size. So during the summer times, especially here in Atlanta, Georgia, where we're located, gets very hot and humid. And so during the day when I'm walking outside, I do want to be able to adjust it a little bit. So the great thing about these dive watches is you can go ahead and slightly adjust that size. Or if you are going diving, you can put it over your wetsuit very easily. And let's take a look at the Omega. So the same thing here. Now this one with the Omega does have a push button, so you don't have to like pull open with like you would on the Rolex. So you just push this little button right here and you can easily slide it. So as far as that goes, I think I would put the Omega Seamaster over the Submariner just from that kind of glide lock system. I think this one's a little bit more accurate and a little bit easier to adjust it on the fly versus the Rolex Submariner. Now, another thing I do enjoy about the Omega Seamaster here is that this does have the open exhibition case back with the sapphire crystal. And of course, any of my videos that you've seen, I am a sucker for that exhibition case back. And I love just seeing that internal movement and just watching all the gears turn as soon as I take off my watch for the day or if I'm putting it back on in the morning. I think it's just a really nice touch that I wish Rolex would put that, and I do see on some of their models now that they are starting to use that exhibition case back. But as of right now, the 126610, the Submariner models, do not have that exhibition case back, so you will have that closed look on the back. So if that's something that is important to you or something that you do prefer, you may want to consider the Omega Seamaster. Now, I do like on the Rolex Submariner just kind of how clean that dial is. You can take a look here that there's not a lot of different colors going on. It is very simple. Of course, you have your Rolex logo right in the center. One thing I wish they would kind of do away with is that Cyclops magnification over the date wheel. I know some people either love it or they really hate it. And for me, I kind of like the look without that Cyclops magnification on the top. I think it just kind of takes away from the overall clean appearance of this watch. And also, too, just kind of the overall description of the 4 lines of description on the dial itself, I think makes it a little bit busy, but I do like that they didn't add any other colors, so it does still stay pretty clean and elegant, but I do wish that they went away with that Cyclops magnification, but I do know it is kind of that iconic look for Rolex. Versus the Omega Seamaster, if you take a look, it does have the date wheel over there at the 6 o'clock. And when you're kind of looking at it at a glance, you kind of may miss that there is actually a date wheel on there, but there is one there at the 6 o'clock. And I do really like that the date wheel is at the 6 o'clock, just because for me, it just looks a little bit more symmetrical. And I do like that they didn't put any sort of magnification bubble, so it keeps it very clean on the dial. Now on this one, on the Omega, you can see that there is a little red tip on the seconds hand. So even though I do like that this one has just the black and white color tones, I actually like the addition of that little bit of red to match the Seamaster logo. And it does make it a little bit easier to see where that seconds hand is landing, especially on the tick marks there. But that is something that I really enjoy. And I know I'm kind of contradicting myself because I like the clean and elegant look of the Submariner, but you almost have to see this in person to see that engraved wave dial on this timepiece, because when the light hits it just right, you kind of get this nice kind of gray tones on those lines, and they are laser engraved, so they're not printed on there. It's not something that they painted on there. There is actually some texture to it. So when you take a really close look into that dial, you can actually see the depth of those waves. And I think it's just a really nice touch that Omega added to this timepiece to kind of give it that overall aquatic theme. Now, taking a look at these two side by side, this one is a 42 millimeter case size on the Omega, and again, 41 millimeter on the Rolex Submariner. I would say that the Omega is just slightly thicker on the case, but again, very minuscule when you're talking about when you're wearing this on on your wrist itself. The Omega does have a little bit more weight to it, I think, just due to the bracelet itself. On the Omega timepiece. So if you are looking for a little bit of a lighter watch, I think the Rolex Submariner might be a better option for you. And then, of course, when you are looking at these two, you can see the detailing that Omega added, and I actually love that additional texture and design that they put on the case itself. So you can see on the lugs that they kind of taper it in, but it's kind of got this like twisted, kind of fluted design to it, which I think is just really cool. And with that touch of that high polish or brush finishing, I think adds a lot of elegance to the timepiece itself. So when I am looking at these two side by side, as far as which one for me appeals to me more, I think Omega has just a little bit more detailing on this dive watch that I really enjoy. And of course, when you are looking at the Omega Seamaster, the one thing that is iconic to this line is you do have that helium escape valve there at the 10 o'clock. Again, that's something that either you love it or you really hate it. And for me, I actually really love that addition of the helium escape valve. I think it's something that's really different that you don't see on dive watches nowadays anymore. So I do like that Omega stuck to their guns and they kept that on there. And for me, I actually like the look of that. It makes it just stand out just a little bit more in my eyes. So the difference between these two as well is you do have different calibers and power reserves. So with the Rolex Submariner, you do have a 70-hour power reserve, whereas the Seamaster, you have a 42-hour power reserve. Now, for some people that have a lot of watches in their collection and you don't have a watch winder, but you do rotate it enough where you don't have to worry about winding it every time, you may consider the Rolex Submariner just because it does hold a little bit of a longer power reserve, probably by an extra day or so versus the Omega Seamaster. But for me personally, I don't have very many watches in my collection, so I do wear my watches pretty frequently, and so I don't really worry too much about the power reserve. So for me, I think I'm still going to go with the Omega Seamaster. So there are some pros and cons, and of course you can't go wrong with either one of these timepieces because again, these are very iconic for both brands. And it's something that if you were to look up Rolex and Omega dive watches online, these are the first two that are going to pop up immediately. And these do come in different color variations. You can find these with a blue dial, or with this one here, you can find it with a blue, white, kind of all different color tones. So you can find one that does match your personality really well. So for me, kind of going back and forth, I think the Omega Seamaster does take it just because of the overall value, the price point that Omega puts these timepieces at, and just everything that they've put into this timepiece. I think the overall value for the money that you're spending, I think this is a fantastic dive watch. But again, you can't go wrong with either one of these. So leave a comment down below. Which one of these two is your favorite if you're going to pick between the two? And then check us out here at Swiss Watch Expo. We have a few of these in our selection, so give us a call.